Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the briefing room. My name is Eric Cavanaugh and I will be your moderator for today's webcast. And folks, we've got a really good show lined up for you today. The title of today's event is Enabling BI and Analytics with Right-Time Data. We're going to be hearing from Richard Thomas of Attunity and from our friend David Loshin from Knowledge Integrity. So let's just start moving through some of these slides here. That is a slide about yours truly and enough about me. The mission, as many of you know by now, of the briefing room is to reveal the essential characteristics of enterprise software. And the reason for that, frankly, is because from an audience perspective, from an end-user purchaser perspective, it can be pretty difficult to wind your way through marketing brochures and websites and other types of events to figure out exactly precisely what it is that these tools do. And so we have a slightly different model in the briefing room. We literally expose a live analyst briefing for the benefit of a virtual studio audience. So the vendor and the analyst are not supposed to coordinate before the show. That's very different from most webcasts, as many of you probably know. Usually there's a very highly polished and scripted event that these webcasts will see, and we take a much different approach. We want unscripted dialogue, genuine conversation about technologies, such that you can essentially look over the shoulder of an analyst and learn as they poke around and try to understand some of these technologies. So we do a different topic every month, and the reason for that, quite frankly, is because we want you as an audience member to have the opportunity to see apples-to-apples comparisons within a particular month. So you can see integration is this month, April is discovery, May is analytics, June is intelligence. July we just switched actually to disruptive technologies, partially because it just sounds cooler, but partially because we want to get to the stuff that's really changing how business is done out there. So the topic of integration, well, as many of you know, integration is typically viewed as middleware, and integration technologies are extremely important for delivering data where it needs to be. The traditional world of reporting and business intelligence has usually revolved around a data warehouse or an enterprise data warehouse, where you pull data from different systems like an enterprise resource planning system or any number of different operational type systems. You pull it into the warehouse, then you build applications on top of that warehouse data that allow you to slice and dice in a very efficient manner. Well, there are lots of things happening these days, folks, that are dramatically changing what's going on. We have this thing called the cloud, which is just huge. We have NoSQL technologies. This not only SQL, of course, SQL stands for Structured Query Language. Those are changing the game because a lot of those database technologies were designed to circumvent many of the traditional barriers or constraints that were built into the relational database model. So we have open source projects that are fundamentally changing how you store data and how you retrieve data. But don't be fooled, relational is not going away. One of the most important things about relational database technology is that it enables multiple different access paths for getting to the data that you want to see. Whereas a lot of these new systems, again, they're very purpose-built. They're functional for a very specific thing is what they're doing. So I give that as some background for this discussion on integration because, again, much of the integration world has been focused on ETL, extract, transform, load. That's the sort of heavy lifting, the bulk loading of data. But ETL is expensive, and ETL opens the door to problems. When you move data around, you're opening the door for data quality issues. We all know that data quality is an ongoing problem. Where do you solve it? Do you solve it at the point that you grab the data? Do you solve it at the customer-facing application? There are lots of different ways you can do that, and there are other ways you can move data around. Many of you, I'm sure, know change data capture, CDC, is something that's been around for many, many years, and I have to think it's coming back. We hear more about it these days. More vendors are tapping into CDC capabilities in order to deliver data where it needs to be, because the bottom line is that the warehouse is something of a political hot potato. It's a very expensive enterprise, the data warehouse is. It's very difficult politically to get access to it if you don't already have access to it. And we all know that batch windows aren't really getting bigger, they're shrinking. As people want more and more data into their applications, going the usual ETL route may not be the best way to go. So we're seeing some different things in the way of getting data where it needs to be. Data virtualization, of course, is a very hot topic, and data replication. So replicating data to deliver bits and pieces to the people who need it, that's also a pretty hot trend. So the analyst today, he's a newbie for the briefing room. We always like to get new voices in here. David Loshin is President of Knowledge Integrity. He's a well-known speaker and consultant focused on data quality, MDM, of course, and business intelligence. And we're going to hear first from Attunity. So Attunity, as you can see on the slide here, focuses on real-time, the real-time enterprise. We all know that increasingly organizations are relying on data that's very hot, data that is impacting the business right now. Well, a lot of that data, if you try to rely on the warehouse, it's going to be too late. You need to have other means for getting that data where it needs to be to empower your business users, to empower your business analysts, maybe even to inform customers of things that are going on. And let's face it, the warehouse is fairly slow in terms of getting data into it such that people can use it. So first we're going to hear from Richard Thomas, Director of Technical Services over at Attunity. We're very happy to have Richard on the line today because he's one of those people who is out there on a regular basis talking to people in organizations who are trying to get this stuff done. So he has a lot of hands-on experience in what it takes to perform these tasks, and we all know there's no substitute for experience. So with that, I'm going to hand the baton over to you, Richard, and I believe the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Eric, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar and the opportunity to speak to you. As Eric had mentioned, we're going to be talking about enabling business intelligence and analytics. We want to talk about...
Your audio is kind of clipping out there, Richard. Are you on a handset?
Let's see if it doesn't get a little bit better. Hopefully it'll settle down.
Maybe go back to your speakerphone. Can you do that real quick?
Okay. I can try that real quick for you. Is that working better?
It's working, at least. You completely clipped out for a second, so go ahead.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and see how this works, and we'll kind of keep it going. And just certainly let me know, Eric, if I start clipping out again.
Yep.
So again, we want to talk about that real-time data, the on-premise, and possibly let's really get serious, as Eric said, about the cloud, what's going to go on that. And let me go ahead and click in here and get that to go down. So let's talk about the business drivers and what a lot of people are thinking about and what I'm seeing certainly in the field about real-time data. And the idea is the timeliness of it. And there's so many people out there, so many analysts are speaking about the need without accurate data that's timely, and that there's just what are we going to be able to do and be able to use with our BI and analytics solutions. So organizations are really needing to be focused on this. And as they start talking about the timeliness of it, it's all about whether it's decision support, the business operations. We're certainly seeing what this means from a customer satisfaction with Twitter, with Facebook. Organizations are literally getting hit in instantaneously with complaints and the need to get out there and get out in front of that information. But as we've heard today already, we need to be able to act on that. And it's not enough just to be seeing the feeds, but we might want to crunch that data, be able to put it into our analytics. So we've got to reduce the latency in which the data is being experienced or changing within our enterprise, and then what we're able then to be able to react and make decisions based on that. We also realize the fact that as we look at this, what kind of impact is this going to have on my existing infrastructure, and what is it going to mean to me with the new systems I want to explore? As Eric mentioned, we all but have eliminated batch windows. Most organizations are running around the clock every day. If one of these things should to hiccup or fail, you could be down days without any real sense of accurate or insight to what's going on in your organization. And certainly, we're not being given unlimited budgets to do this. So we really need to have an eye towards what is this going to mean? What are the costs of implementing this? So as we think of this, I want to talk about the checklist, what people need to start looking at. And first and foremost, evaluate what kind of decisions are being made today and look down the road 6, 12 months, build that strategy of what you might be faced with and what you need to do. What individuals are going to be out there? There's so many diverse groups, each needing different types of information. Most of our data is in silos. These groups are spread all over the organization. How and what are they going to need? How timely are they going to need it in? And when we consider this, what is the impact to our existing processes of business and what we're going to be doing looking forward? So we've got this information. What are we going to be able to do? How are we going to expose it for business intelligence? How to crunch the analytics and be able to, improve on that, be able to get it in a more timely basis, kind of get into that gap analysis and be able to meet the current needs that are out there. And certainly, what is this going to mean to your IT requirements? And we want to kind of think about that, talk a little bit about what we're hearing about this concept of big data, volume versus velocity versus variety and complexity. What does all that mean? What's the impact to my organization? Taking a step back, I want to tell you a little bit more about Attunity. I've been with Attunity practically the entire 20 years that it's been out there. And we have an extensive R&D experience in data integration. And we've done this as an independent provider of change data capture, connectivity, getting at legacy informations, exposing it from everything from web services as we talk about data replication. We've done that directly with thousands of customers, and we're also very excited what we're being able to do with some obviously large name software companies in an OEM situation where these organizations are recognizing the value of high performance, timely change data capture, being able to look and work with diverse data stores, and how we're going to be able to do that in a cost-effective manner. I'd like to touch on 3 key partners of ours and how each one of them is exploiting the Attunity technology stack. From a Microsoft perspective, they're really kind of going fully across the spectrum. They started working with us to use high-speed connectors, talking about Oracle and Teradata and how to set a new trend to be able to move that data at rates that have never been seen before, to start setting up that master data management, that data warehouse, and even starting to look to the eye of possibly Azure and the cloud. What does all that mean? We've expanded beyond that and the success we've had with Microsoft to not only do that, but then get into change data capture and improve the way that methodology of integrating that information. So we touched upon the fact, and Eric had mentioned, that CDC's been out there, it's been known, but what we've been used to in that parlance is the complexity of doing it. We've got to look at a new way of doing that because of the value that it brings. For Oracle, very similar story, but different platform, doing it for the key critical legacy systems, the mainframe, everything that I might have tied up in that, and getting it into their SOA stack. In the case of IBM, we kind of start taking a different approach where this is, what do I do with all of my old data, archiving, taking that information. We have to have it in today's methods and what we do, litigation-minded society that we might have, is there's no such thing as archiving and forgetting it. No sooner than you put it away, you've got to rip it right back out there and get out there and actually be able to act on information. So we gave the ability to go back into that diverse archiving engine and make it fully aware and make it be able to be queried with modern BI and analytic tools. When you look at the Attunity customer base, what you clearly take away of this is very horizontal across the market. Everything from providing weather data to financials to healthcare to manufacturing. And we're very excited about the diversity of the customers we have and the many different things that they're involved in. So real-time information, what are we talking about? Well, certainly what comes to me and that I can't help but realize now is the value of instant. I mean, even as a consumer, I'm in there trying to get my taxes done, and I'm right out there on Facebook and literally posting something and getting an immediate response. I remember the days of sitting on 800 numbers thinking I was going to experience multiple birthdays before I was ever going to get any help. So now as a consumer, I got a problem, I want an answer. Companies have got to react to that. We're getting hit with it either from a mobile perspective, online. We need to be able to address that. And you've got to have it to be competitive. If you don't have it, if you cannot react, you will not be competitive in this marketplace. So that all points to real time. If it happens and changes, you've got to be able to act on it. So obviously, big data at many different levels is starting to play into this. Certainly the most obvious thing when we think of big data is just that we've got so much of it. that even our existing data stores, because they're working around the clock, we're collecting unprecedented amounts so that in exceedingly large volumes. And this, the variety now then leads us to the volumes, and that what we look about this variety is it's not the traditional, not the nice structured relational data, but the simple fact is we can't ignore our unstructured data. Whether that's unstructured data from a legacy-based system, meaning I've got a multi-redefined COBOL copybook that's representative of some RMS or VSAM data, or to the fact that I'm literally getting what I really think of unstructured data as text. A lot of text is coming into this, various other, lots of physical files, the obvious digital aspect of this, videos, pictures, all of that information. And I think now what the key piece of all of this is the velocity, the fact that it's coming at us at an unprecedented rate. With no batch windows to speak of, the velocity coming at us at an ever faster pace, we need to be able to meet those challenges. What are we going to do about that, and how are we going to address it? When I think of the Attunity product family, what we now see here is kind of the genesis of what integration was going to be about. The fact that I need to first be able to connect to this information. So I have these silos of operational data stores. If we think back 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, these silos were all handcrafted and made from the data, the OS and the computer vendor provided us a sound and familiar file system that we could work with, and we built applications that met the specific needs of my business. Many organizations still run a significant amount of their business on that. We can't neglect it. So I can't be thinking about this big data, cloud-centric solution and just jettison what might be 40, 50, up to 70% of my corporate data. So I have to be able to connect to that older stuff. It's, it's a very mature, it has incredible insights. Knowing that, I may need to be able to take it, federate it, and then I might start looking at the idea that I might be able to start streaming that data. This idea of what change data capture is all about. What is change data capture? What does it mean? And how does change data capture relate to replication? We'll try to gain some insights into that. That first I want to improve on my replication if I can do it from a change data capture perspective. And so that brings us to the Attunity Stream product that then complements and then extends beyond the Attunity Replicate product. So idea is identify what changes are and maybe present it to a whole host of tool sets, such as the classic ETL or business analysis tools. Or I want to go end down there, turn around the ETL model and maybe do the ELT model, which might be what's represented in Replicate, or just be able to put out there in a replicated stream of information what I need to do timely things on it. And what we certainly recognized is with the ever-changing marketplace is that structured and legacy systems is not going to be enough, that we're going to have a lot of unstructured file-based systems. And with the recent purchase of RepliWeb, a tremendous complement to what we already have, we now look at enterprise file replication, which is a key aspect of what we need to be able to achieve. When we think of that graphically, what does this all look like and what do we have? We have all of these production data sources or data presence that are out there. So kind of think to the left, moving to the right. These various different tools present us the opportunity because not one hammer is going to solve each and every problem. We're going to have many very surgical instruments to attack the problems that we're faced with, and a collaboration of all of this type of technology then gives us the opportunity to work with our analytics directly, possibly work with data warehouses, data marts, and that I have all of that information out there and available to me. What we recognized, having been in the marketplace, working in data integration, and literally as an organization at the genesis of it, at the ground, at the basis of it, meaning we started connected to that information, we were able to present it. I remember I got into this industry literally trying to provide an ODBC driver to a legacy-based system. I started there. Now I've evolved and worked with everything from hierarchical and on that, but what we've recognized in this idea of working with the data as we evolve is the ability to deliver real time is still caught up in many of the old ways of thinking. As an analyst, as someone looking at my corporate data, I need to try to change the way I do it, have a better opportunity to think about what's at hand and not have to go through these month-long monolithic approaches to think about replication or change data capture. Simplify it. Why can't we? The trends are there. The software that delivers it needs to follow it. So what is my source information? What is my target? What do I need to do to achieve that? Is it possibly I'm just going to work with my own internal data warehouses? Do I need to think about remote data centers? And certainly, where's the cloud going to ultimately play a role for me in my organization? Improve on the ability to do this. You know, all of these things are just so we've got to automate 3 key aspects of data replication. And the idea, if we're thinking of at the database level, that I'm working, that there's more to my data than the actual information that I collect and that what might be changing. Certainly, my metadata is as important to me as my data and what it represents to me. So if I add new collected information or I collect new tables, I don't want to bring down and redesign my system. I literally, in flight, want to be able to pick up the metadata changes as I do with my data changes and then put those into the target. So we change the way we think about this. I recognize the fact that I'm going to have to deal with the initial part of my data. Can I improve on that? Can I look at it differently? And as I had mentioned about our relationship with Microsoft and what we've done with them, we've put a lot of energy into the idea of high-speed data loaders. We've got to start and seed this thing. We have such unprecedented amounts. We need to use a better mousetrap. We've got to really put a lot of energy in to initially loading the database. But once that's done, what we really need to do is put all our energy in understanding the delta changes. A small percentage of my data ever changes at any one moment. As we heard what Eric talked about the classical way of ETL is it's very batch bulk oriented. We've got to change that around the clock, real time, all the time, and only identifying those pieces that are changing that are key to my organization and make them front and center for my decision making. So, quickest time to value. Select a source, literally select a target, and I should at that point at least be at the stage of starting to replicate that information and make it available to the analytics, to the fact that I might want to re-crunch and rework the data, rework the numbers. So what we envisioned is literally a lightweight browser-based mechanism running on the key affordable multi-core, multi-threaded servers where I've identified a source, I've identified a target, and actually I go in and have decided what my tables are. I'm prepared to run. That's what we need to be able to be thinking about so we can put our energies in what we really need to understand, get back to that checklist about the fact that who are the groups, who are the people, what are they going to need to do, the demands of them. What we don't want to do is be spending all of our energy working in a change data capture or replication methodology that is still a throwback to 20 or 30 years. We need to think about the fact that, as I literally heard today, is will I even have permission? Some of these silos of information are based on very large, monolithic, packaged applications. I have a lot of constraints, both at my support level of what I'm allowed to do, what I cannot do. So if possible, zero footprint. Zero footprint on that source system. Can I be able to get effectively the changes that I need to recognize, get them out of that system, and get them delivered to where I need to go? So really reduce the impact on that server. This is reducing the impact on IT, less to install, less to be concerned about, less to hear about complaints on. And it really then starts driving that total cost down. Some examples of that this is achievable: Oracle, DB2, SQL Server. So the architecture, and I think that we're certainly seeing in the era of big data, is that I need to be able to scale along with it. On affordable Linux-based servers, for example, that I can literally get the bulk and then have that change data agent up there recognizing these log-based changes that are going on, whether it is the classical relational or if it is the legacy, to be able to achieve and provide log on that also, or being able to recognize that what I may be replicating is those enterprise files that I need to get around my organization. So it's very diverse. and that I can put as many servers into this at a cost-affordable method that I need to achieve the kind of latency requirements and the volumes that I'm having to deal with. So again, high performance, highly scalable. We need to think about taking advantage of what we've got out there with our 64-bit Linux, Windows Server architectures that are fully multi-threaded, multitask, multi-server. The idea that extracting the initial load should not be ignored, that is equally as important to getting this thing running. But while that's running, I should already be aware of what the changes are. So when a load finishes on a file, CDC just seamlessly takes off and starts achieving what I need to do in my organization of having that low latency information delivered to my organization and get it in that sub-second time frame. And again, low impact is across everything from my network to my servers to my people to my budget. So now, we just talked about the perfect ideal, the perfect replicate scenario, but we recognize the fact that we may need to be able to extend beyond that. When I think of these very large applications, out in the field, one of the first obstacles I used to run into is the utter and complete saturation of a human being to just cope with the metadata. You point to a large database, a PeopleSoft database, SAP database, and you look at that, and there's 60,000 tables out there. And you just start scratching your head. I don't know what I could ever collect at that level, but I really don't want to know about it. So already, this ability to rethink how I identify what's critical to me, to be able to think of patterns, think of ways of getting to that, 30 or 40 tables of key information in the tens of thousands of tables that exist. So we always think, when we think about this large, excessive volume, it's even at trying to get through and find the trees in the forest that matter to you can be a daunting task. Forget the sheer data volumes. Then when I've identified that, what pieces of those tables might I want? And can I start putting some filtering and some pattern matching? Can I start doing some transformation? Meaning, while I'm in flight taking advantage of that, can I start seeding where I need to be, start getting ready for what I ultimately need to do, or possibly be done when I get there, when I deliver it? And certainly the obvious that I need to be able to monitor and look at what's going on in my organization. So again, get the data sources added, the many different sources, whether it's SQL Azure, the large, Greenplum, Teradata, be able to target this information, be able to get it all out there, do it quickly. I focus on what I want to get and how I want it to look, and not to go through a daunting task of actually getting it done. And obviously, I want to know what's going through my organization, what's being moved, what kind of transactions I'm seeing, what I'm loading, so have a monitoring console out there and available to us. So my key summary points that I really want to touch on as I think about all of this is that I want to change the way I'm doing things. Start thinking about focusing on what my end users, my true customers are going to need to do, be able to work at a level where my energy is being put into my business problems and not trying to get my software to work. And that I really want to focus on real time at many different levels, from legacy to traditional to packaged to unstructured, be able to work with a lot of different data sources, be able to get that information out there, and be successful with it all in what I'm trying to achieve and accomplish. I just want to let folks know about some of our key information and how you can reach us. I'm sure that you'll be able to follow this information up if you want to find out more about it. I really encourage the questions out there. I'm excited about taking the opportunity to answer many of them. I can kind of see some of them starting to flow in. And I think I'm getting to the point now where, Eric, I think that we're about to send this over to David.
That's exactly right, folks. We have a bunch of good questions already. David, I've gone ahead and given you the keys to the car, so just click on that slide anywhere and use your down arrow. There you go, and just dive right into your slides, and then we'll be into the live analyst briefing. Folks, send questions in any time. You can use the Q&A or the text area. We're watching all that stuff. So, David, go ahead.
Thanks, Eric and Richard. I thought that was great, and in fact, it kind of touched on a handful of issues that I've been noodling on recently, and I thought it would be worth kind of just going over those real quickly, so that will frame some of the questions that I've got. to follow up on your presentation and your talk. The first is something, of course, that you mentioned, the big data information explosion, the same sound bites. I think you and I are visiting the same websites and grabbing the same sound bites, getting zettabytes and petabytes and words that I've never heard of, orders of magnitude that I've never seen with respect to the amount of data that's being generated. But one question I always throw out there, which is how much of that is noise and how much of that is signal. And I think that part of what you're saying also kind of addresses that same kind of question. Let me move on to the next challenge that I've been noodling about recently, which again also you had noted, which is the traditional business intelligence framework, where you've got data flowing from operational systems through some staging area into a data warehouse, and then pushed back out to some analytical frameworks that are then being facilitated or materialized for presentation in different analytical presentation mechanisms are being pushed out to the analysts or the users, et cetera. There still is an elongated turnaround time. There's still some degree of difficulty of assessing the results within a reasonable time frame, and the legacy approach to decision support is always focused on kind of the high end, the strategic decision makers, but not necessarily the broader community of decision makers who I would say 95% of them don't even realize that they are decision makers, but rather they're the integration of the need for actionable intelligence has been integrated into their own process. And that's this concept of operational business intelligence, or right-time business intelligence, or integrated intelligence. And we've got the definitions which are focusing on the ability to take the results of the decisions that people are making and feed them back into their operational or transactional processing, so that they can achieve benefits immediately. And here's an example of the IDC definition: when organizational culture, business process, and technologies are designed and implemented with the goal of improving strategic and operational decision-making capabilities of a wide range of internal and external stakeholders. So when I look at this, and then I consider this in the context of what is the current mania for talking about big data and velocity and volume, and that seems to be the thing that's on everybody's lips these days, I still go back and I say, well, wait a second, we've just invested 20 to 30 years worth of technology development and process management and centers of excellence in developing the standard approaches to doing things that people need to do, like reporting on standard key performance indicators. We're not about to bail on all that just because we've decided that big data is something that everybody needs to do. So the question that goes through my mind, or the challenge there, is actually the integration of our existing capabilities with any type of newly developed types of technology, such as the things that are now being grouped under the rubric of big data. And that then goes back to another challenge that I've been thinking about, which is integration and synchronization of data. And I'll even point to some of the bullet items on this slide, which precision and coherence enable consistent query results reporting and analytics. Yet, if we're looking at huge amounts of data coming at wide, high velocity of a big volume of data from different types of sources and a wide variety of formats, et cetera, we're going to end up with a lot of potential confusion, because if we haven't incorporated the underlying control into ensuring that the data that we get is aligned, then we're going to end up with a lot of confusion and a lot of and scrap and rework and reconciliation, and ultimately the same questions that have arisen every single time anybody wants to introduce technology to solve an analysis problem, which is yes, I can do the mechanics of doing that analysis, but can I trust the results? And so that says to me, what are the things that we need to do when we want to integrate any kind of new technology or scale up? Well, we need to maintain coherence across the enterprise. We need to reduce or eliminate data latency. We need to provide timeliness and currency of the information so that it's usable, and then integrate it both inside the analytic activities and the operational activities, so that we can exploit the actionable knowledge that we get. And that's kind of focusing on from a technology standpoint, that goes back to the same types of things that you were just talking about: replication, change data capture, and data federation. And in that context, and I'll kind of remind everybody of the 3 points that are kind of bugging me that I haven't really. I don't know if I explicitly said that, but the first is the need to incorporate big data and cloud, et cetera, all that kind of stuff inside our environment for not just for operational and transactional processing, but for exploitation of actionable intelligence. The second is one that you also dealt with, which was legacy data. We've got all these mounds and mounds and mounds of records and transactions and logs, et cetera, that we've done for all this time. We're not going to just toss the baby out with the bathwater. And then one that is always hiding in the back of my head, which is my background from high-performance computing, which is the automation of integration in ways to reduce latency. And so I've got a couple of questions that I've formulated in response to the stuff that you've been talking about. First is this whole desire to make business intelligence pervasive or directly integrated within the operational environment suggests that there's interest in exposing the results of business intelligence and analytics to that broader constituent of BI users, and as I said, many of whom are oblivious to the fact that analysis is being incorporated into their application. So that means there's going to be a growing need for mixed-use reporting, for mixed-use analysis that draws from a lot of different sources and delivering to a lot of different touch points. So that being said, in order to facilitate right-time delivery of actionable intelligence, what would you say are the 3 most critical aspects of what would go into that data integration layer to enable a reasonable, say, sub-second time frame for response and reaction?
Thank you, David. 3, as I had mentioned to you, both you and Eric, I'm out in the field a lot, and I'm hit with a lot of things. When I think about when I approach someone out in the field and they really have a distinct problem, I think I touched on it a little bit. First, I want to understand, who needs the data. What exactly is your audience? How do you plan to deliver this to them, and how quickly they're going to need it? What is their definition of real time? What window of opportunity do they need to work in? And so, that's kind of the first thing I want to think about. And then, the flexibility. Remember, data isn't the only aspect that's in play here. I mean, enterprises may need to ensure that they integrate solutions, the handle to the whole big data problem that is out there, or the poly-unstructured data that they're going to find out, that's those text files. What am I going to have to work with? So, I think that the ability to work with the many different silos. So who's going to want it? What are they going to need? What's the diversity, David, that it's going to come from? I may have some coming from the traditional, easily relational, but I'm also sitting over here and I have some file-based stuff. We see a lot of that into the field. At least half the customers we're faced with today are coming to us with non-traditional data sources. And certainly when you look how Attunity is moving, the advent of the enterprise file data is certainly a presence. And then lastly, everyone gets at is that I like to call that low thing, meaning low price, low impact, low intrusiveness or non-intrusiveness. Everyone's going to clamor and need to that because of a lot of constraints. So for me, if I'm going to distill it down to 3 things is, what's my audience and what have I got to work with? Where is all this different data coming from? And I have to have a clear eye to the impact of that. And for me, these silos play a good thing, like, how am I going to deal with the velocity and the volume of all of this, and the different variety and the complexity that it's going to present as we try to bring that information together. So certainly for me, what I see in the field on a daily basis and the active POCs that I'm involved with are those kinds of things that we have to keep an eye on and realize that it's becoming very non-traditional in what we have to do with the data. And what I certainly see is that when we take that in mind, David, is that I can't sit in a POC environment and have the luxury of weeks or months to be able to implement that. People are getting very impatient, and they want to see action in days. So we got to redefine how we get at that. And that's certainly what I've seen, David.
Well, so that kind of leads into my next question, which has to do with that speed, right? You were talking about a number of different aspects there. What does the audience define as being real time, and what's the window of opportunity for response, aside from the technical characteristics of getting the right connectors in there and getting the right access and doing that at a low cost. But then the last little point you made, which is rapid integration, and that's sort of a little bit about the next item, which is that the primary bottleneck in any kind of high performance environment is always going to be data access latency. It's the slow comparable speed of getting data into the place where it needs to be, and it's only going to become more acute as the amounts of data increase, as the degree of data repurposing increases, and as the expectation window for response decreases. So can you explain how replication and change data capture are used to reduce data latency, and whether there are ever coherence issues that are going to impact the usability of replicated data?
Certainly, David. Well, let me give you some thought about this. If I could take a step back, and I apologize if the audience is far smarter and more sophisticated than I, then maybe I'm being redundant here. But what I have seen in working with the sales folks that I'm involved with and just out there in the general public is, what's the difference between change data capture and replication? And I almost want to take a step back to me, is first understand that. And it took me a while to really understand what the differences are. I look at it as change data capture is literally the precursor if you want to have ideal replication. There's the old-fashioned replication, meaning that bulk load thing. Point it at something, identify, and just grab it all. I don't know what's important, but I'm just going to take it all. But I want to talk about replication that is based on the fact that I've identified changes. So first, to really do justice to your question, is I want to identify changes, and that I may stage that information, and then with a whole host of different types of tools that Attunity provides, I can exploit from there. I may still want traditional ETL to be able to benefit me, but if I don't work with changes and I'm still caught up in the bulk, that those batch windows won't happen. And then what replication is if we're lucky, replication is literally start with that initial bulk possibly, but then in the change data capture methodology, only what's changing, I am streaming almost like data. Take it out of A, put it into something that looks and feels very much like A, but it's that operational. It's the changing piece of it that can start running and crunching my analytics against that. So when I think about that, I first want to take a step back and have a good grasp of the CDC and replication in today's marketplace and what they can do for us. And then, I want to then make it very available quickly. The idea of, in a non-intrusive way, can I identify those things that are happening to my data? So if I am just working with that finite subset of information data, if I'm just working with what's delta changing at that very moment, this is very manageable, and that's how I can make it real time. I see something that changes, and I quickly present it in whether it's a dashboard or a learning system or into a data warehouse or data mart, then I'm going to crunch my analytics. But if I can work with just what matters, I have the ability then to deal with the huge volumes that we're seeing in big data.
Well, so let me push back on that a little bit, which is the question of coherence. I mean, we're getting, so even if we are capable of streaming changes in real time, my analytics are not necessarily, going to always be expecting to be sitting and looking at data that is always live. I may need to take run a report or submit some data into some Hadoop or MapReduce application that's sitting on some appliance, and if I'm looking at that data, that essentially becomes a snapshot while the data that is actually sitting in my analytical environment. If you are doing real-time integration, now I've got, like I said, a coherence issue. So how do I deal with needing to be able to take a cut at some of the data, look at it, analyze it, slice and dice it, and not necessarily want to have it consistently moving? I mean, is there a way of configuring your framework so that you get the best of both worlds there?
Well, certainly, and to me, coherence, I think of it twofold. So straight CDC can offer some of that. So even if it is in flight data, but I do need to completely rework what it's going to look, or that I take it part of the way, analyze it there, and then just deliver something in a completely changed model that there is no coherence to it. Maybe change data capture is a good fit for that. Also, to me, replication is not necessarily, it is very coherent, meaning I see it in A, I put it into B. When we think of the Attunity product set, that it doesn't always have to be in flight. A huge, significant number of our customers have decided that they are taking these analytic tools and they're grinding it against the data as it sits in its existing part, meaning part of it might be legacy. Some folks may not have been able to get this done and do their analytics because they couldn't get at what represents a lot of the data. So that idea of connecting in a real-time basis natively to the data, if need be, feed it into the analytic engine of my choice that I'm going to work with it. And these huge analytic engines just need to be fed with a lot of data. And possibly I might be able to try to create a singular view on it, where some of it is being fed, kind of taking a multi-tool approach to it. So live where I can get it, move it as it looks now, if possible. I may have to in-flight alter and change the way it looks to fit my model. And then when that's all said and done, because of the advent of so many diverse, even solutions in their own right, I may have to see a multi-view of different data warehouses.
Well, so let's switch gears a bit. I mean, that was a good answer. But let's talk about big data, and assuming that the promise of what everybody is talking about when it comes to really getting that ability to do big data analytics and using different types of algorithmic frameworks and programming environments to do this. Let's say we really want to ramp up and scale it up. We have many data streams or feeds. Some of them are the ones that you were talking about that may be accommodating legacy data formats. Some of it is real-time data that's coming in from data providers. Maybe some of it's being pulled from files that are sitting somewhere out on the web. What's your corporate strategy to accommodate a highly scaled up, high volume, number of high velocity data streams?
Well, David, a lot of times in life we don't get to do what I like to refer to as almost like a do-over, and that because we've been in the integration space for such a long time and have had the luxury of working with some impressive partners, we've had the opportunity at the building blocks to get involved and get close to the data. And I kind of touched on this, the importance of this capability a bit earlier, that solutions, are designed, with this do-over, we really put that effort into thinking about the scalability, supporting multiple data sources, and expanding upon that. Because if we've built through this, we've had many different product offerings that start thinking, literally first at the CDC capability, then the streaming capability, then the replication capability of doing that, and that working with partners today like Hortonworks to be able to expanding this capability even further. And when we think about big data, the volume seems to be the big part. But what we're really finding out, it's really more of the velocity and the variety and the complexity. And so with that, it's kind of a multifaceted approach to attacking it. It's not enough just to deal with those volumes, but we need to, work on that, literally real-time basis. So back to that idea of if big data is going to be out there, I need to be able to reach it. I need to be able to reach into the cloud and possibly get it in some cases or put it in there. I need to work then also with what I have at hand with my data sources. That we're going to want to be able to not only process the data as it's changing, which I think is a key piece in dealing with the velocity, but I know that I'm going to have many different silos. So I need to have the diversity of working with many different kinds of information. And certainly what we did when we had a chance, and that what I like to say kind of redefine the way we look at it, and my presentation went into that a little bit about rethinking the strategy of actually implementing this, is that we knew that we wanted to be on the kind of appliances today that can really deliver the kind of performance we want to see and really exploit that multi-serving, multitasking, multi-threaded environment and an architecture that will just scale into that and allow people to do that. So I think that although people are talking about it more, and there's only some fringe solutions out there at the big data level as we kind of look and analyze this, I think it's a presence. I think it's going to be important, and I think that with Attunity's move to start thinking about enterprise file, and that we're going to have to be able to deal with that because so much data now is unstructured. And so, when you look at our alignment of our current product offerings and our acquisition of RepliWeb, I think it clearly puts us in the right position to start addressing those big data concerns. But as you said, with a sense of skepticism, the fact is, what I see in the field today is those old things that just keep biting us are still biting us, and people got to do with that. A lot of legacy, a lot of relational, a lot of packaged applications, and I don't have a lot of budget. So I find myself talking more about it, but implementing what everyone is traditionally known today.
So I'm glad you said that. I mean, I think that basically we're agreeing that some of the mania, like I said, for the new technology is silencing the continued silent scream of the same consistent issues and challenges that we always have when it comes to data integration. And let me see if I can lob one more question in your direction. With a greater interest in absorbing multiple data streams from a large variety of different sources, there's going to be some set of requirements for arbitration between these data sources regarding the quality and the usability and the timeliness and the currency and consistency, essentially the quality characteristics of the data that comes from different streams. How do you perceive the ways that the data integration provider should support the need to push those business rules for arbitration and validation and correction into the integration layer?
Well, now, when I think about this, David, I start thinking about, it can almost be an abstract term because I know that there's so much, what are we going to define as the integration layer? I want to kind of, like I did earlier, kind of ground ourselves in what we've seen in the market. There's certainly the need to have a simpler, easy to implement ways to move data, between traditional analytic platforms. I think that the aggregation and transformation, the classic things that we know about these days in doing this, it's that whole data warehouse piece that we're using our traditional ETL methodologies of doing it. So one, can we give the existing models a better way to do it? So as we know, we have a lot of business rules already out there in the integration level. So we can't ignore the fact that I may already have a tremendous investment in ETL. So can I give it a better data stream that it takes its already existing rules and puts it against? I think what we're really seeing now when we think about going beyond change data capture and start thinking about ultimately what we want in replication, we're going to turn those letters around. We're going to start talking about, let me extract and load into these high-speed engines, these the large data sources and databases that are coming out today to start crunching this data and feed them. So we now start letting them do the transformation or the crunching or the roll-upping of the data, or even start thinking about what I'm seeing out there is EEL, or expedite, extract, and then load, and replicating this data. So that comes back to there's so many diverse scenes. If we want to be able to get out there and change the rules, speed there to get there, and that the timeliness of getting it there. So feed my traditional ETL, which may have a lot of business rules, possibly then also look at models that are not going to be weighed down by that methodology, where I'm putting it into these sophisticated engines and then they're now crunching on it. So they're going to need the diversity of getting a lot of it quickly. I might do a lot of the prep work in flight to keep that performance up there of the real time. I don't want to set it down anywhere and literally do it in flight as I go out there and try to deliver that information to literally so many different types of hybrid environments, data centers and clouds that are trying to pull that data and consume it.
Right. Well, I'll go ahead and jump in here. Good question, David. Thank you for throwing those out there to keep the conversation going. I'm going to go ahead and push, I think, one of these old slides just to kind of get a look at some things. We have a number of really good questions from the audience. So, Richard, if you would, take a quick gulp of water and let me start throwing some of these at you. So here's a really good and obvious question. One of the attendees asks, how is the infrastructure different or affected, both price-wise and resource-wise, by the requirement to maintain real-time integration?
Well, traditionally we saw that real-time wouldn't work with the old traditional ways of doing it. And so I think the key points that I want to point on to is that, if at all possible, zero footprint, meaning that we don't install on the source systems. I can't stress enough the obstacles that people face when they have, because you're running so many different types of packaged applications, you just simply can't get to it, or the vendor who owns it is going to constrain you with, their whole silo of solution, and it may not be best of breed, it may not help you, it may not provide you you want to know. So there's certainly the idea of the cost of that. The second is can I build a high-speed engine? We're finding incredible results moving literally tens of thousands of changes, per second. We've got customers that are moving literally terabytes in the bulk and tens of thousands of changes per second, and that I can do it on cost-effective servers. Can I literally go out there and get a low-priced, multi-core, available box, put Red Hat on it, and exploit it? So again, that aspect of it. So don't touch the source if at all possible. Can I run on cheap hardware that I can literally run down, head off to Costco and grab something, and then just get a solution out there? And then look to the fact that that I want to have that kind of diversity where I'm not then impacting my staff. You saw the simplicity of what I showed of being the analyst and focusing on what I know to do. I don't want to put a solution out there that's so complicated that I've got to bring in a small army of consultants to achieve it.
Yep. Okay, good. And here's a really good observation followed by a question. I think that it's a good question for your wheelhouse here. One of the attendees writes, Informatica appears to take the fully independent route to data integration. Database vendors, of course, make their own tools, but that's largely just to deal with their own systems. And Attunity appears to straddle the middle by partnering without encroaching on the DB vendor tools. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In the most cases, we do. Occasionally, we'll run across it, but certainly from an OEM perspective, we're coming in there enhancing the marketplace of what they want to do and what they want to achieve. And we have taken an approach, and you can see some overlay between us and some of the big vendors. So not only are we great partners with them, there are times when we're in the field where we become fierce competitors with them. We think we've got a better way of attacking certainly some of the ways that IBM and Oracle are approaching this. I think Informatica is kind of different in that they do have that large silo, but they're not a database vendor. But they kind of have a long list of solutions doing that. And what we're trying to do, and certainly representative of what we're doing out there with the recent product offerings, is really simplify that, both at the cost level and the delivery level.
Yeah, and it's very interesting what's happening. At the top of the hour, I kind of referenced some of these new database technologies, and then you think about the cloud, and you think about integrating with the cloud as opposed to integrating in the traditional sense, that sort of enterprise application integration, message queues, and that kind of thing. And boy, it sure seems to me as though someone has just kind of thrown the board of playing pieces up into the air, and they're all going to fall down where you want them to fall these days. But the point is that organizations really are encouraged now, it seems to me, to think outside the box in terms of how they get the information they want to the place where they want it. Is that a fair assessment in your opinion?
I certainly, in the field, that's what I'm seeing is that when we go into these organizations, they have a clear understanding of what they need. They might be struggling with the available tools to get at it. They know the case in point when you go and look under the hood of one of these packaged applications, and it's staggering what you find underneath there. You just want to close the hood and say, I don't even want to think about it. It's overwhelming. So then, how am I going to address that? I got 60,000 tables. I care about 30 of them. Where do I begin? And so the customers are certainly coming to us. What I'm finding though, when they get to us, Eric, when they get to us, they really have a clear understanding of what, at least a starting point of they've identified what the source might be. Now they're looking at affordable ways of getting that data and putting it out. And obviously, they're owning a database. They got a vendor. They've looked to the vendor, and they're not necessarily liking what they hear to say. In many cases, it's the complexity to implement it and the cost of ownership. And I'm just going to cut to the chase. The sheer dollars that they've got to spend to buy into that entire technology stack and to get where they want to be, they can be in the hundreds to millions of dollars. And we think that a best-of-breed approach that's simplified from the development standpoint and a very fair price to put it in their hands, that there's, like you said, we're running around, 1,600-pound gorillas here. There's plenty of room for a company like Attunity to really help organizations exploit the opportunity and make it cost-effective.
So
right, we have a couple. Oh, go ahead.
So,
go ahead.
One of the things that you just asked, Eric, had to do with increased need and desire to move data to where somebody wants it to be. But if what you're doing is constantly copying data and moving it around, I mean that's ultimately what you're doing is you're bound to fall into the same trap that people have been subject to for the last 40 years, which is once I start moving it around, it's all of a sudden it's even with something like change data capture, et cetera, you're still going to be subject to uncontrolled processes that are going to let the data sets start to get out of sync. And once they get out of sync, the quality is no longer to be there, and then you're back to the same old problem of inconsistency and lack of coherence. And interestingly, there was one of the questions that I had, which we didn't have time to get to, which was, at some point, when are we going to change the way that we do things, and instead of continually moving the data to a place of where the computation needs to be, when are we going to start moving? The data's already there; it's all over the place. Why can't we move the computation to where the data is?
In memory, right? In memory database. That's one of the questions we've had from the audience.
That's one example. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, do you want to comment on that, Richard? The question from the audience member, which is a very interesting question, and this is why I think it's so fascinating to be in our business right now, the number of paradigm shifts that we're experiencing is causing there to be so much disruption in how we do things, and it also, at the same time, opens up the opportunity to do things all sorts of different ways. One of the attendees wanted to know, how do you compete with some of these new in-memory databases, which are able, as David suggested, to do that number crunching right at the source of the data? And it's a bit of a skewed question in a way for what you're talking about, but if you would just respond to it, I think you can give some insight to the audience.
Okay, well, I have a habit, and I guess it's the nature of me always being in the field for so long, take a step back. With what you have said, Eric, and certainly on a key point of what Dave did, when we first got into the data integration piece after we talked today, one of the things we tried to push on to the world was this idea of federating. Back then, we didn't even have the word virtualizing. We didn't know that, but we were so far ahead. We were years out in front of our ski tips. What we found is that we literally came out there with the ability to do a heterogeneous, on-the-fly query join of all the data. And what we found was we were so far ahead of ourselves that the data quality, the way it was structured on all these legacy-based systems and current systems, it was a nightmare. Worked with a big telco. You think in a telephone company there's only one way to express a telephone number? Well, guess what? No, there's not. We found 10 different ways to say the same bloody thing. So what we learned was that we were so far ahead of the time, they had to do what you and David are talking about. We all know how wildly successful data warehouses have been. And we had to basically, as in a company and organization, sit and watch and feed those, both in bulk first and legacy. But what we've now found is happening in the market is we've saturated the data warehouse market. How many more data warehouses are you guys get to build in your lifetime at an organization when someone says enough is enough? I'm not funding another one. So it's the idea, can I virtualize what I've already got, whether it's in memory or already pre-existing? And what's nice about these various new data sources is they have been cleansed. The quality issue has been solved, meaning they are speaking telephone number one way, meaning that common ID be able to do it. So we recognize the idea to get to the old and feed the new and work on the deltas, but somewhere along the line, can we leave the data where it is and work with what the customers have already created? I got 6 data warehouses. The answer isn't marching in here and say, now what you really need, as the 800-pound man to the 600-pound man, is another data warehouse. It's not practical. So can I work with what's there?
Right. And so can you just, and we'll just throw a couple more questions. We're going a little bit long here to get to all of them, but can you talk a little bit more about the whole concept of metadata management and how you enable this governance? Because to David's point, you know, if I'm the data governance director at a large organization, I hear what you're saying, I'm getting nervous. I'm thinking, wait a minute, we've worked all this time to slow that down to get you what you needed. Now you're going around us and getting it faster, granted, but you're getting it outside the scope of our data governance structure. Or are you actually now integrating, and granted these tools are fairly new, with some of the tools that are being used for things like workflow and change management and that kind of thing? So just a little bit more detail on how you deal with the governance side of the equation and how you take in policies that may be embedded in other applications like Informatica, like Dataflux, some of these other guys. How are you able to maintain that integrity of data and data quality while doing all this great stuff?
Well, the approach we've taken, being early adopters of data integration, was the hallmark of the architects that had saw this was kind of a three-tiered or approach to this. And the first rule was lay down an architecture, even though we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, to make it open and standards-based. So what we typically see on how we work with the governance is much of the metadata that we're exposed to is, and many times, that legacy stuff. So I mean, we just had an opportunity actually in the field where people are going out there and sunsetting existing systems and looking to put in new, but all of that metadata was legacy-based. It was very complex. It was really COBOL copybooks where they had one whole piece of metadata. It had 47 different representations of one file of what the data really could be. And first we got to do is that we're not going to try to be everything to everyone. We want to first get to the data and then feed it standards-based up to Informatica. So a key point that I want to touch upon is, although we may compete with Informatica, we have so many customers that have DataStage, Informatica, ODI, all of these various ETL and data integration tools, and we're feeding them. Not unlike what we do with our OEM representation, we are also doing it with all of the major providers. So what we're doing in the governance is offering up the information. So those tools that are specialized specifically in the governance is that we're participating with them. So first and foremost, do no damage, stay standards-based, and feed what's there.
The Hippocratic Oath for data, right?
There you go.
First, do no harm. Okay, I'm going to give you one last question, and then we'll call it a wrap. This is a really interesting question, and I think it kind of, again, gives you an opportunity to talk about your history and what's going on here, because it's one of these fascinating, simple questions that reveals, I think, the inertia in large organizations and the complexity in large organizations, because the attendee asks, why is there an independent provider of CDC? Shouldn't this be a core feature of every vendor providing database technology?
Well, I'll ask the answer, and answer the question by the audience out there, and the fact that they're, first and foremost, you're sitting in this briefing room trying to find out more. That's obviously you're interested, and why is there a little fish in such a big pond? There are always some, and I think it's a coined phrase where if I always buy IBM, I don't lose my job. Yeah, but you may not do your job well. You may not do your job well. I think that what we do is we keep them honest, we give you options, and we don't get complacent. I can think of a lot of little companies that started as an idea and a dream, and look at what they've become. I think that we bring data integration and the opportunity to make it a better marketplace. And if that really wasn't the case, you know, everyone would just buy one vendor, one tool stack, one thing, and it was kind of the idea that at one point a big database company tried to say universal database. We know how that went. And look at the diversity of what's in your organization. All I literally need to do is I can answer your question by literally asking you, tell me everything you got installed at your site.
Right.
And,
well, and you know,
and I want to be great.
Sure, and I'll comment on something too. One of the things that happens, I just know from experience in working with software companies, is that a lot of times these big guys will go and buy a smaller fish either to round out their stack or to quash the competition, quite frankly. And then once that smaller fish is absorbed by the bigger fish, it's an open question as to whether or not that technology gets supported, whether that technology gets promoted, marketed, sold effectively, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes you'll get a very sharp tool that's gobbled up by a big vendor and it kind of disappears. So that's the beauty of having smaller companies out there innovating. Like you say, it keeps the big vendors honest, and it just keeps the ball moving. I mean, look at the innovation in the database space right now. It's mind-blowing how much stuff is happening out there. Obviously, it's not going to be the case that everyone is just going to buy Oracle anymore. You've got all these other database options that are very fit for purpose. We have a whole research project going on that line right now. So with that, folks, I'm going to say thank you to David Loshin and to Richard Thomas for an excellent presentation. We will archive this webcast for later viewing. We archive all these events, and we'll publish them either at InsideAnalysis.com or for the database stuff at DatabaseRevolution.com. But thanks again, gentlemen. Excellent presentation today. The archive should be available shortly, and feel free to send your comments to us as well of what you think of the content. You can email yours truly. You should be getting an email from me on a regular basis, many of you. Just send an email back, or you can tweet to us as well, to Robin Bloor or myself or Mary Jo Knott or Rebecca Joswick. We're all out there on Twitter. So, folks, with that, we're going to sign off and say take care, folks. Bye-bye.